ちょっと早かった。あと30秒ぐらいで始めていきます。はい。では、10時半になりましたので、Day2、のキーノートに入っていきたいと思います。きっとこの声が、イングリッシュルームでは英語の通訳のさんの声が聞こえていると信じていますけど、大丈夫ですかね？大丈夫そうですかねって、こっちから見えないけど、大丈夫と信じます。はい。で、本日、じゃあ、デナさんです。よろしくお願いします。デナさんです。
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Dana. Kawaguchi-san is going to introduce me more formally. I will be in that room in the back. You will see me on the screen. And I will come back 2 more times to run an experiment with you all. How does that sound? Yes? All right. I'll see you soon.
はい。ということで、いろんなチャレンジが入っておりますので、皆さんチャレンジを楽しんでいければというふうに思っております。はい。で、本日、2日目の基調講演者として、ペラエバさんに、話していただきます。デイナさんと、ダナさんですね。デイナさんだとずっと思ったんだけど、デイナさんっていうのは、英語の、US の発音で一般的に DANA っていうとデイナって呼ばれるので、許容してるけど、本当の、元の発音はダナだっていうのを昨日知りまして、ダナさんって言い直そうと思っております。はい。で、ダナさんはですね、私ちょっと個人的に長いお付き合いがございまして、実は2010年に遡るんですが、当時ですね、別の会社、クイックという会社にいたんですが、アジャイル UX を視察しようっていう会をやりました。2人で行ったんですけど、で、ニューヨークにちょっと出張しに行ったんですよ。で、その時に、当時楽天におられた、三谷さんという方、三谷博美さんという方にお声掛けいただいて、ユニオンスクエアにある、ある会社に、その楽天の、オフィスに行ったんですよ。そしたら、その三谷さんが、三谷さんってのは、37シグナルズっていう会社の、レールズを作った、人たちですね、の、DHH がいる会社ですね。そこの、大きなチーム、小さな仕事っていう本が、とても有名なスタートアップの、チームの運営についての本があるんですけど、それの翻訳者の方だったりします。で、今、品川区でフューチャーロケットっていうスタートアップを今やってるんですけど、そんな三谷さんに、向こうからちょっと声をかけていただいて、X かなんかで。で、そこで、うちのオフィスに来て、見に来てください。で、楽天に買収された、リンクシェアという会社があって、そこに、お邪魔したんですよ。そしたら、そこに、多分私スクラムやってると思いますっていうふうに三谷さんがおっしゃっていて、そうすると、普通のオフィスの横に、仕切られた会議室があるんですけど、そこの部屋が、会議室じゃなくて、ワークルームっぽくなって、会議室のままなんですけど、そこにみんなが一箇所に座って、なんか付箋が壁にガーッと貼ってあってっていう、いつも皆さんご存知スクラムっぽい、ルームができていて、そこを案内してくれて、で、多分、スクラム私やってると思いますっておっしゃっていて、なるほど、すごいですね。で、スクラムマスターの人は今ちょっと研修に行っていていないんですけどって言って、それが実はダナさんだったんですね。で、その後、翌年のアジャルカンファレンスでダナさんとお会いすることになりまして、すでにその時カンファレンスのボランティアスタッフとしてダナさんがもう活躍されているという形でした。で、だんだんその後ですね、何度も毎年大体アジャイルカンファレンスでお会いするんですけど、その後、DevOpsのところで DevOps ロゴ&チョコレートゲーム、後ほど紹介していただくと思いますが、こちらのワークショップを発表されて、で、さらにそれが本になって、みたいな、すごく、出世街道というか、私から見るとすごい活動されているなと思いながら見ていました。で、楽天テクノロジーカンファレンスのその頃、やっぱりそのワークショップやってほしくって、ご案内し、来てもらって、ご招待して、で、どんなゲームかというと、厳密な役割分担から始まって、変化、市場の変化に応じて自然とチームが一丸になった協調作業ができていくみたいなワークショップなんですね。そんなのをやっていただきました。で、 デナさん、そんな形でご活躍なんですけど、その後、2020年に、グローバルスクラムギャザリング、世界のスクラムギャザリングのニューヨークでやる会がありまして、そちらのチェアに、なられました。で、私もそこに渡米して、参加する予定だったんですけど、ご存知の通り、2020年ってのは新型コロナウイルスの、年でございますので、世界的流行で、3月の5月にやる予定だったんですけど、3月に中止になってしまいましたということで、で、その後ですね、2023年、デンバーで開催されたアジャイルカンファレンスでは、オープニングアクトということで、今日もちょっと、ワークショップやっていただくと思いますが、そちらでワークショップ、数百人を相手にした、協調ワークショップをやっていただいていて、なんか、一緒に行った、初めてアジャイルカンファレンスに行った人と一緒に行ったんですけど、これがアジャイルかって驚いて帰って、いや、そうかわかんないけど、大体そうだと思いました。で、その時に2024年、去年のですね、アジャイルカンファレンスのチェアがダナさんになるということが発表されていて、ちょっと私残念ながらそこ参加できなかったんですけど、そんな形で、コミュニティの中で、最初ボランティアスタッフからだんだん真ん中に行ってチェアになってということで、なんか今年は、チェアも終わったんで、普通の参加者としてやっと楽しめるわってさっき言ってました、昨日言ってましたけども、そんな感じでずっとコミュニティで活躍されている方です。で、今日ちょっと DevOps の話をしていただくんですけど、DevOps の源流の話、昨日、粕谷さんの話で聞いていただきましたよね。フリッカーという会社のインフラの自動化とか、あとコラボレーション文化についての発表があったという話をご存知の方多いかなと思います。で、DevOps には実は2つの側面があって、一つはエンジニアリングのツールの話がもちろんありますよね。ツール大事です。で、一方でそれだけではなくて、ツールをどう使っていって、人々がどうコラボレーションしていくか、部署を超えてというのか、チームを超えてか、もしくはチームの中でデブとオプスがいて、様々なところで協調しながら、やる。でも協調しながらやるだけじゃなくて、一方で、それぞれが独立してちゃんと仕事が終えられるように環境を整えていくという、そのあたりが重要なポイントかなと思います。なんで、開発と運用が上下関係でも、上流、下流でも、受発注でもなく、自分たちの責任範囲の仕事をうまく整理することで、相手の仕事を円滑にすると。これが DevOps の、結構重要なポイントかなと思います。ってな感じのことを、多分、昨日は粕谷さんに、技術の変遷ですね。あと組織の、で、どんなことを試してきたっていう話をお話しいただきましたので、今日はダナさんに、もう一つの側面の協調の文化であったり、人間の側面、DevOps の、そのあたりをお話しいただけるのではないかと期待しております。では、隣のルームから話していただきます。ダナさん、よろしくお願いします。
All right, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, very good. So I'm going to share my slide and start. Okay. So I'm going to skip my introduction, even though I prepared a beautiful slide. You're not going to see it because Kawaguchi-san, thank you for a very long and detailed introduction. So the only thing you need to know about me is that I happen to be a very curious person, so I find myself in different roles at different times, and that's actually very helpful in seeing the big picture. So what I'm going to be sharing in this session today. So I'm going to talk about my own culture shock and culture change stories from my experience. I'm going to connect it with the people side of change because DevOps is about people and is about change. And I'm also going to introduce safe and playful ways that I found useful in bringing DevOps culture to organizations. And this little unicorn, that's actually something that was built in Rio de Janeiro when I was running my session. There's a lot of memories around that. Okay, so culture shock and culture change stories. So 2010, that's what Kawaguchi-san was referencing. So Rakuten Linkshare, that's the company that you see on this picture. But that's not the company that I started working with. I actually joined a company in New York that was called Linkshare. It was a US-based company. And so I thought I am joining a US-based company. But a few months after, I learned that that company was acquired by a company that is Japanese-based company, and it's called Rakuten. And so we went from being Linkshare to Linkshare part of Rakuten to Rakuten Linkshare to Rakuten Marketing. And so as our name was changing, so was our culture. Because right in the middle of New York, we started having Monday Asakai. We learned about Amatinashi. We learned about Rakuten Shugi. And so all these Japanese words started coming in, but also the different types of rituals, different types of expectations. So it was very strange. It was very weird. But guess what? As we were going through this Rakuten Shugi in New York City, there is something more drastic was happening on the other side of the ocean. So in Tokyo, there was a much bigger change happening at Rakuten. And if some of you heard about this very weird word called Englishinization. Nobody? Okay, so this is the word that in Rakuten was created by Hiroshi Mikitani to represent this massive effort of taking the entire company from speaking Japanese to speaking English. And not only speaking English, but actually conducting all business communication in English. Why did he do that? Well, because as he was acquiring more and more companies, like he purchased one in New York, he purchased one, in San Francisco, something in Spain, something in other parts of the world, what he realized is that, hey, I have all these companies, but they all speak different language. So how are we going to actually be one team? So it's not enough to just come and say, hey, let's do Rakuten Shugi in all these places, but we need to be able to speak the same language every day. And that's why he came up and he announced in Tokyo that 9 months from now, everyone is going to speak English. And the higher you are in the chain of command, the higher you have to have your TOEIC score. It's like if you are like individual contributor, I think it was 600. If you're a manager, you have to be at 800. And so imagine that. So English is not a native language for me. It took me many, many years to learn it. When I came to US after 13 years of learning English, I could barely speak. And now my Japanese colleagues were asked in 9 months to get to this very proficient level. So as you would imagine, massive change, massive shock, right? So the second story about shock and change is actually why I'm here. This is a story of how I came from dev to ops and how I discovered DevOps and what Phoenix Project, chocolate, and simulation games have to do with any of this. So I was originally working as a developer. I spent 12 years working in Power Builder, Java, and some of the other languages along the way. And at that time, operations and development were two different worlds, and we didn't even know. As a developer, I had very little idea of what operations do. All I knew is that when we finished writing our code, and at the end of the sprint, they sent the code over the wall, someone on the other side of the wall is going to pick it up, put it in production, and make sure it's running. Okay? So the opportunity came up for me to take on database administrator's manager job. I had no idea what DBAs do. But I figured, listen, it's an opportunity to step up, right? So why not? I know how to write create table statement, so I'm sure I can figure out how to manage DBAs. So to my big surprise, the life on the other side of the wall was very, very different. Just like you see here, in development, we were all focused on speed, delivery. On operations, it was something very different. It was stability, reliability, keeping the lights on. Those were the goals. And so for us in operations, every new code that developers were throwing to us, it was a potential disaster, potential bug, potential issue, right? Because the only way we knew how to prevent issues from happening in production is to not do any deployments, right? That's the safest way. Yeah, and so that's what became my way of living, right? And as a DBA manager, I was on the second level of escalation, which means that if my DBA didn't pick up the on-call signal in 5 minutes, that escalation would go to me. So which means I was on the on-call rotation 365 days a year, right? 7 days a week, 24 hours. So very stressful. And so definitely a major, major culture shock. And what's interesting is that it was right around the time when DevOps was gaining momentum. And so I also, got to know about it, and it sounded very interesting because it was actually promising to break that wall. Okay. And around that time, there was someone by the name Andrew Clay Sheffer who defined this concept of wall of confusion. So the wall that separates the development and operations, that it has to do with different way of working, different tools, different goals, and so that resonated so much. And so the more I started learning about DevOps, the more it became really interesting to me. And at some point, I came across this definition of DevOps. The person who said it is actually in this conference. I think he's speaking later today. And so what resonated for me, that it was kind of very practical, and yet it had it kept that basic idea that it's not just about the tools. It's about goal alignment. It's about incentive alignment. It's about that cultural change that needs to be there. Okay. And the other thing that I discovered is the book that was called Phoenix Project. And I was so inspired by that book that it actually made me very interested in getting more people to learn about it. And so I was talking to people in the elevator. I was purchasing the book and giving it to people. Just, you have to read it. It tells the story that I lived through, because again, the shift from development to operations, that book had very real, very painful, visceral memory for me. Okay. And so people did not want to read it. And like, come on, guys, it's a great book. You have to read it. You need to read it. Nope, they didn't want to read it. So what was lucky for me at that time is that I was taking a course on Coursera about gamification. And so I figured I may as well try, right? If people don't want to read it, if people don't want to learn it any other way, why don't I create something that will bring them that simulation that will be fun to run? It will be something that they'll play, but I will sneak in some learning moments. I will introduce some of these ideas that really resonated with me in the book. And so that picture that you see, that's exactly what people are doing. They're playing this very first version of the game that later became Lego in Chocolate. What you see here, there is no chocolate. There is no Lego yet. There's only chocolate, because at that time, it was my very first version, and it was happening in November. Anyone knows what happens in the end of October? In the US, we celebrate Halloween, right? Trick-or-treating. So I had lots of chocolate left in my house after that. And so because I wanted to simulate this product development lifecycle and software moving through, all the stages of implementation all the way into production. So I used chocolate, and, people were packing into these little boxes as a metaphor for the software development process. Okay. So it was very rough in terms of the quality of the game, but it still gave people a good understanding of how does it feel different when you work in the traditional way versus how you work in the DevOps space. So what I learned from that very first attempt of changing culture is resistance to change is normal, and it's always there. Okay, so no matter how big or small the change is, you will feel and see the resistance. And is that? Especially when the change that you're introducing is large or complex or confusing. So if you think about many ways that companies introduce DevOps, and they start with, if you need to implement this DevOps pipeline or DevSecOps pipeline, these are 15,000 tools that you need to learn and master. It sounds very difficult. It sounds very overwhelming. So then change becomes, I'm going to quote one friend from here, everything is difficult, right? Change becomes difficult. And the more difficult it feels, the more resistance people are going to face. So I'm going to run this first experiment, and Alex is going to come and help me do that. And this experiment is about how you like or don't like change. So that's what we're going to try right now. So I'm going to go to the other room, and Alex is going to come here. So here.
Translation to start, but hopefully this isn't going and being translated in the other room. Okay, I think they're pausing. So, all right, so today's experiment is pretty interesting. So first, here's what I want you all to do. Stand up. All right?
Okay, so everyone is standing up. Shake your hands. Now you're going to fold them on your chest.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get there. All right,
Notice what hand is on top. Do you have the right hand or the left? Okay. Now shake your hands again. And fold them the other way. The other way. Okay. Okay. Did you see that some of you went like this? Yeah? Because it's confusing. It's different. Right? So shake your hands again. Okay. And then cross them any way you like. Okay. Did you cross them the old way or the new way? If you like 95% of people, you went back to the old way. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk more about that, but thank you for doing the activity with me, and see you again. How did he do it? Was he good? Yeah. Okay, thank you for trying this out. So the point of this experiment is that we all go through change, and when we do, there is a certain way we respond to change. And so what I'm sharing right now, it's called Kubler-Ross change curve, but I like to call it roller coaster of change. Because what happens that when you are experiencing a need to change, whether it's something that you're choosing or something that someone is forcing on you, like I just said, get up, fold your arms this way, that way. So you're going to experience some emotional responses. And if the change is big and painful, then you're going to go through this shock, denial. It's like, is this really happening? Is this for real? No, that cannot be. Some frustration, maybe even depression is like, I've had it. I don't want to do this anymore. And eventually, you may actually see that, maybe it is working for me somehow. So imagine if this little experiment with the hand folding, imagine you came to work and your boss told you that from now on, you're only going to fold your hands in the office the other way, the new way. You're not allowed to do it the way you always done it. And if you don't fold it the new way, then your job is gone. Okay, imagine if that was serious. I'm sure the reaction would have been like, that's ridiculous. Why would anyone want to do that? So that's normal, like shock, denial. I'm not going to do it. And then maybe, I should look for a new boss who is not as crazy asking for such a thing, right? So it's, again, these changes. And then maybe at some point, as you were still staying with that same boss and continue to fold the hands in the new way, you realized, oh, actually, my back pain is gone because of this new way of folding hands. Maybe. And maybe you said, actually, it's not that bad, that new way. Maybe I can experiment and continue folding my hands this new way. All right. And so at some point you decided that, yep, actually it's working for me. And that's where, if you follow the curve, then that's where you get from decision to integration. And so the reason why I'm bringing this is because we all go through these emotional responses, including when we introduce DevOps, Agile, or new processes in our organization. What's interesting is that a lot of times we don't know about this, and it feels very scary and different. And it feels like this is the only thing that's happening for me right now. So knowing that it's actually a normal way to respond to change is useful. What's even more useful, and knowing that there are frameworks that work with change management. And one of them that I want to highlight today is something that's called ADKAR. Not everyone likes it. The reason why I like it is specifically for the element that talks about people's side of change. And so ADKAR is an abbreviation. It stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And so these are all steps in introducing change. So imagine the traditional way of bringing DevOps into organization. We start with DevOps is automation and tools. So we go straight to knowledge and ability. And then maybe after that, we say, everyone, get to next maturity level. So that's reinforcement. So how useful is that? I mean, it might work, but people still may be left wondering, why are we doing this? We've always worked the other way, right? So why now? Why do we need to change? So we missed that awareness and desire steps. And so what I found is that starting DevOps introduction with a simulation game, or a way for people to really experience why they need to be changing and what's the benefits for them, shift the dynamic. And so we go into, hey, DevOps is a new way of working and thinking, and it's actually good for you. Okay, and so as they are building that awareness, they are generating desire, then we can start with, okay, and it's about automation and tools, so let's learn that. And then the next reinforcement part becomes, and community is there for you, so you can learn together. And I think that way is much stronger than, starting from the tools and forcing it from the management side. All right. So I keep talking about the game. I wish I could play it here, but maybe next time. So what the game does is actually bringing very basic, very foundational level knowledge about the 3 ways of DevOps. And the reason why it's still relevant and still important, because a lot of people don't actually know what those 3 ways are, or they don't realize how they're relevant to what they do. And so the first way is about system thinking, or always seeking to increase flow, looking at that end-to-end product development lifecycle. Second way is about amplifying feedback loop. And so that's what you see in that simulation as well. And I'll talk about the third one later. So I mentioned Phoenix Project. So this is one place where you can read more about these 3 ways. There is also an article by Jin Kim on the web, so you can read that as well. But in the game, so what happens is that 3 rounds, and the 3 rounds are there to show people first, how do we work when we don't have DevOps, so the traditional way of working, and then how small changes can make a big difference. So this is roughly how the first round works. So all you need to know is that there are 9 different roles. And so when I run the simulation, then every room is working together. And so the tables represent different part of organizations. And so we start with having multiple development teams or business team. There is operations team, security team. And in the first round, they're all working in silos. So there is no communication exchange. They have a lot of dependencies. They have a lot of bottlenecks in that process. But because there is no communication, there is a lot of silos. What happens at the end of the first round is that business gets zero value delivered, even though developers think that they were working really, really hard. And just a game, right? But it resembles the actual experience so much that people get this huge aha moment, like what happened? We would just made developers 3 times more productive and still business didn't get anything. What's wrong? Hey, you have a bottleneck in your process and it's not development. So then as we go through the next rounds, we start introducing slowly concepts like shift left on security, or running the cross training to increase the T-shapeness of people in this game. And then little by little, they start seeing that the more they're collaborating together, the more they're looking at optimizing the flow of this product development, which in this case is packages with Legos and chocolates. So it's all fun and game, but it is making things visible, and people are able to connect with the improvements that they're making, seeing how much now they're more productive and they're able to bring things to the business. And then we round up in round 3 with introducing things like containerization, small batch sizes, environment creation on demand. So some technical terms, technical practices, but we don't write any code. So we literally work with Lego and chocolate. So the reason why it's effective is because, one thing, you can bring this to management or business, and they can connect with why DevOps is important. They don't need to know code, but they can get the it is important thing, because a lot of times, if manager or the leadership is not supportive of the DevOps change, then it's not going to be effective. So getting them on board, that's one way to win the game. So another thing that I wanted to mention is that people in the simulation act the same way they do in real life. And because it's a game, it becomes very easy to pick up on that dysfunction and then debrief it after every round. Because then we're not criticizing them in their real work. We're highlighting the dysfunction, and we're talking about the impact on the end-to-end overall organization from that dysfunction. And it becomes safer for people to acknowledge it, to laugh at it, and then to make change. So in a way, this game is building that awareness of current way of working versus the new way of working, and why it's more effective to work in the DevOps way. And it's creating that desire to change. It's also giving people a vocabulary. So they go back and then they use the same metaphors from the game. And it's becoming easier to have the conversations around changes. Another thing that I want to mention is that the more I run this game, the more I understood that every simulation is an excuse to debrief. And what I mean by that is that people don't learn from playing the game. People learn from debriefing the game. So having a conversation after the game and connecting what they observed in the game to their actual work, okay? So if any of you are trying to run a simulation, remember having that debriefing conversation about what people experienced, how is that related, how they can learn from that and connect with the real work is the most important part of simulation. Fun fact, as Kawaguchi-san mentioned, so I did run this game in 2015 in Tokyo. And my biggest surprise when I came to run it, it was part of Rakuten Technology Conference. So knowing that Rakuten went through Englishanization, my expectation was that the English room would be full. But no, people, when I came to run the game, people didn't understand anything I was saying. So I appreciate Kawaguchi-san jumping in on the stage with me and helping me translate the game. But they didn't, in spite of the challenges with the language, they still were able to get a lot out of it, because in the simulation, they talk to each other. It's them interacting with each other. It doesn't matter which language they speak as long as they understand each other. And they got a lot of learnings that we were able to come up, bring up in the debriefing. Right. Some of the other things that are super useful in this is that concerns that people have about DevOps, they're coming out in this game. And I know this is a little bit hard to read, but the reason I'm showing this here is because these are some of the concerns that people shared during the debriefs. And some of the concerns are around cross-training takes time. Yes, it does, not just in the game, but in the real world as well. So knowing that upfront as you're designing your DevOps or DevSecOps adoption strategy is super useful. So you don't underestimate how much time it will take for people to adjust to the new ways of working. Concerns about this, there's one card that says no ops feeling. So what that speaks to is one of the people who was playing an admin role. After the cross training, he felt like he has no job anymore. And just imagine if you introduce and change the organization and someone feels like his or her job is threatened. Are they going to be willing to help you with that change? No, right? Because they're going to be resisting that change as much as possible because they will not see themselves in that new picture that you're trying to bring in. And so being mindful of these concerns through the game is helping to frame the way how you're bringing in this change differently. Okay. So one thing, and I know people are like, how do I do that? So one thing that I made sure that I emphasize in this subsequent rounds of this game is that the role might be different. So you will not be doing manual admin work anymore after DevOps. But there is definitely a lot of ways that as someone who has skills in system administrations, you can be part of DevOps. It's about learning more about automation. So it's almost like reskilling yourself a little bit, but still that background, that experience that you're bringing is super useful. And so once people see themselves in that new picture, they are more eager to become part of it. All right, so somewhere along the way, people, as they saw me running the game in different conferences, they started asking, Dana, how do I run this game? Can you just give me instructions? And so the game is a little bit complex. So I started trying to write these instructions and so published my first book on LeanPub. And then a publisher discovered me at some point, and then that's what led to me publishing the official version 10 years ago, and then publishing the new one last year. And the one that I just published last year is interesting because it has all this learning, all this experience that I had running the game in multiple countries, with multiple organizations, but also some of the interviews that I have done with trainers that are using my game in their own countries, in their own places, and in their own organizations. And so several case studies I included in the book, and 3 of them I want to highlight here because I find them very interesting. Like this very first one is about a coach from Canada who actually translated this game into French. And as he did this, he also facilitated it with 15 different groups. And consistently, he was getting this level of understanding that as you're running it, you need to be picking up specifically on people's behavior, right? So if you notice something that people are doing that is at odds or not fitting this DevOps way of working, highlight that because you will see people leaning into this command and control management style in the game. So someone in the game would start bossing people around, right? Come on, it's a game. But yet people are kind of embracing how they act in real life. And so using that as an opportunity to highlight that this is not how we want to work together in the new way of working. So being able to use that as the opportunity to say, hey, this is different in DevOps space. Also asking, connecting it to the real world. So after we play the game, are we okay? Are we working in the old way or are we working in the new way? What should change so that we're able to truly embrace this way of working and 3 ways of DevOps? The other case study is from Germany, and Peter Fassbender, he actually was braver than I was because when COVID came around, people reached out to me asking, Dana, do we have a virtual version of this game? And I tried creating a virtual one, but because I was so passionate about every element in the game, it became difficult for me to create the same playful experience in something like Merle because it just became too difficult. And what Peter did, he wasn't as emotionally attached to this game. So he took away a lot of parts of it, but what he kept was that focus on flow. And so he introduced a different variation, but that was bringing a similar type of learning outcomes for this, specifically helping people see the value of focusing on improving flow. And this last case study is from the group of coaches from Mexico who run the game with 60 groups. There are 10 trainers that do this, and they do it both in person and in virtual. And the cool thing about their sharing was that they highlighted that sometimes you will meet skeptics, people who don't believe in this way of introducing DevOps. And then one of the ways to deal with that they found was bringing a senior leader who is already using DevSecOps practices or DevOps practices in his area, and having that senior leader starting the workshop so that they get this proof that it's working. They get someone who has done it before, share the experience with them. And another thing I mentioned is that the attitude of the trainer plays a very big role. So if you're coming with a simulation game and you are uncomfortable running it, you are scared, you are maybe bored, maybe you don't very understand much of how to run it, it's going to be challenging for participants to truly engage. And so these guys are saying, we love running it, we're enjoying it, and so participants enjoy learning in playful way as well. And that's where I want to mention something that may sound controversial, playfulness. So I found that for many workplaces, playfulness sounds like something that we don't do in workplace. But guess what? Bringing some playful elements, where it's a simulation game or it's an activity in the retrospective, it really helps to shift this atmosphere from anxiety or fear to curiosity about something and passion. It helps build the connection for people to establish these new opportunities. It also works as team building because people play together, and then it's easier for them to talk about serious stuff, reduces stress, and also brings two parts of our brain together. So analytical way of looking at a problem, creative way of looking at problem, and then when we are bringing debriefing, that's when we even bring in the critical mind. So is this working for me? Is it something I should be doing differently? So all that is enabled by playfulness. And that's why you see me bringing these little cards, doing the different activities, because I find that when people feel safe to connect, safe to talk to each other, a lot can happen. And that's what brings us to my second game, which is called Fear in the Workplace. And if that sounds scary, that's by design, because this game enables conversations about something that people usually don't want to talk about. The elephant in the room, some dysfunctions, something that's uncomfortable, something that they don't feel that they can talk about. So this game actually creates a space for them to enable these conversations. And it connects to the third way of DevOps, because the third way is all about culture of continuous experimentation and learning. And you can't be experimenting if you're afraid to experiment, right? And DevOps is a lot about trying new things, failing, and learning from failure. If the space you're in is not allowing that, if every failure is something that's not possible, not imaginable, you cannot talk about it, then it would be super difficult to introduce DevOps. And so one quote I wanted to share is another quote from Jin Kim that is coming from Unicorn Project. And this is the one that talks about psychological safety. So psychological safety is where we make it safe to talk about problems because solving problem requires prevention, which requires honesty, and honesty requires the absence of fear. Right? So the way how people play the game is there are many ways to do it. And we're going to experience one way as one of the experiments today. But a lot of times they start with looking at the different scenarios that are provided in the game and trying to understand that the person is saying something that's in this scenario. What kind of fears might be there for that person? Then when they explore these fears using these little cards, little monsters, similar to the one that you have on your table, they go into exploring, okay, and what about their managers? What are some of the fears or challenges that their managers experience? And as this game works as the diagnostic tool, then they can talk about, okay, now that we know the problem is, and let's talk about how can we address it. What are some of the practices we can bring in? What are some of the interventions that we want to try that can help us go there? So games make it actually safe about even talking about fears that are present in DevSecOps or DevOps adoption. So I'm going to share a few of them that I discovered through these conversations with different teams. And these are 5 examples that are very typical for team members to experience when they are just getting introduced to this new way of working, the DevSecOps or DevOps. Fear of losing my job. I mentioned that was coming up in the game. It's very real in this in actual work as well. Fear of lack of expertise because many tools, lots of overwhelming big tasks for them to take on. Fear of going outside of my circle. So that's interesting because, you know, if someone is very used to working in silos and they've spent years and years operating that way, and now you tell them you need to be working across the entire organization, you need to collaborate with the people in this other group, it might be very scary. And so that's another thing. So fear of failure, fear of unclear role boundaries, that's another thing. As we get cross-trained, as we can do more, what exactly do we need to do and what's the new process that we need to operate with? So a lot of those things are coming up. And for managers, there is another set of fears that are present. So losing control might be one of them. Feeling that they might be obsolete if they don't learn fast. Obscure organizational landscape is like, how do we operate in this new way? And, you know, what are the new departments that I need to interact with? And, you know, maybe even losing circle of influence. So all of those are at play. And so, again, being able to talk about this and work through this is something that's super useful. Okay, I'm going to share a few safety practices, ideas about what can be done if these fears are present. I'm not going to go into a lot of details in them, but you know, we are going to have a Q&A session, the interview at the end. So if anyone is interested, I definitely can expand on you know, all these practices. And I want to mention 3 different categories that, you know, I collected from my own experience, but also from some of the additional sources, one of which I highly recommend for leadership level. There's a book called Fearless Organization by Amy Edmondson. So that's definitely a great source. But if you think about individual practices that every one of us can do to help create a safer place in the organization, in their area of organization, it would be being the first one to ask clarifying questions. And that might be tough when you're in the room and you might be the junior person in the room and you think that, oh, probably everyone else knows this. I'm the only one who's confused. But guess what? A lot of times, if you're confused, there are at least 3 or 4 other people in the room who have the same confusion. I actually had you know, someone in my team who made a point of asking questions. Even if she knew, a lot of times like, I could sense that she knew the answer, but because she's kind of observed that there is a confusion in the room, she would ask, so can you clarify this? Like, what is that? I'm confused. And so when she would ask, people would say, oh, thank you, I was confused too. So just kind of take that back with you, that if you have a question, someone else has it too. And the more you are asking this question, the more people in your room start, on your team start saying like, oh, actually, it's okay to ask questions in our team. That person asked and nothing happened to them. They got a response. So maybe I can ask it too. So it's that, again, building safety in even those small steps. Asking for providing feedback, that's a great way. The other one, asking for help, because again, we often feel like, oh my God, I must know everything. And if anyone finds out that I don't know everything, then, I don't know, something really bad is going to happen. But guess what? It's not possible to know everything. And so asking for help is actually helping that safety get created in your team. Some of the other things that are possible at the team level. So definitely, if you don't have a team working agreement or team norms defined in your team, something to look into, because that's a conversation that's helpful in establishing that, safety, because that's where you can talk with your team about what's normal around here. How do we want to work to be the best team? And so having these conversations up front, what's working for you and what's not working for me? How can we get to a place where this is a place where we both feel comfortable and it's suitable for both of us? So great conversations. Speaking about feelings in the retrospective. So there's like two things built in this one. First one, definitely have retrospectives. If you don't, these are great, I don't even call them meetings. I don't want to call them meetings because these are great events that you want to have, because that's opportunity for you as a team to build trust. And bringing feelings, that's another kind of vulnerable thing that helps you build trust in the team, because you want to be able to talk about things that are failing, things that are not working. And that's the step before that can help you do that. The last one I want to share is something that's called host failure parties. And so what that means, it means create space and try to do it in a fun way, where you can actually talk about failures and create space when others can learn from your failure or your team's failure. Because guess what? Again, you're going to fail. You're going to try new things. You're going to fail. But if you share your learning with others, maybe they will not fail the same way. And so the more organizations are able to share these learnings from their failures within their teams or even outside, the more there is an opportunity to do better next time. Okay. Right. And for leadership practices, there are several things. Curiosity over blame. That's an interesting concept where instead of asking, let's say something failed and failed in a big way, instead of asking, so who is the person who is responsible for that? And who do I blame for that? Trying to understand, so what was there in a system that created that failure? What was not present? And or what kind of skill was missing so that whoever made the decision made that decision? I know it sounds very confusing, but it's all about finding how you can prevent that failure in the future. What can you implement so that that failure doesn't happen next time? What do you need to pay more attention to so it doesn't happen next time? Instead of finding someone who made that mistake or who to blame. Okay, so that's what curiosity over failure, over blame. And then early, often ugly, that's a fun one because that's actually something that the CEO of OpenTable used to say. And so OpenTable is the application in US that allows you to make reservation in restaurants. And so often, early, often ugly, it means that give me information early and often, and don't worry about make it perfect. Don't worry about like polishing data or polishing information. The more I'm able to access it fast, the more I'm able to course correct. Okay. And then the last one is about being relentless in removing organizational impediments. Because remember, we mentioned retrospectives. So if teams are identifying something in retrospectives that's not working for them and something that outside of their control, they need help from leadership. If leadership is there and helping, then they will be bringing more of those challenges again. They won't be afraid to do it. But if it's like goes into this black box and no one knows what happens with those impediments, then teams are just going to start hiding them or not bringing them up. Okay, so there are a few other ways you can enable conversations about difficult topics. One of them is called tiny demons. You see people, walking around with, different pictures of fears. We can run this at some point, not today, but there are definitely more ways to do it. If you haven't heard about liberating structures, I definitely recommend looking into this, because liberating structures are a collection of facilitation techniques that are specifically designed to engage everyone. And the whole idea there is that every person in the room is brilliant. They have amazing ideas. And if we don't involve them in the conversation, if we don't create space where these amazing, brilliant ideas can be brought together, then as an organization, we're missing out. So there are 33 ways to do it. And so definitely look into it if you want your teams to work more effectively together and hear every voice in the room. Okay. Last case study before we do the activity is actually about using something that some of you may be familiar with, the marshmallow challenge. Usually people do this activity to talk about things like agile values or experimentation, and this is where people are asked to build a tower out of spaghettis and the marshmallow. And what everyone makes an assumption that marshmallow is very light. So they build this tower and they put it on top, and then most of the time the tower fails. And so the same coach that I mentioned at the beginning, the one from Canada, he used this marshmallow challenge together with the fear in workplace game, taking this into space where the team was invited to talk about failures. So it's not just about iterative building, it's not about assumptions, but how do you respond to failure? How, as a team, we make failure acceptable as long as we learn from it. Okay, and that brings us to the end, except for the one last experiment. So you heard from me about the culture shock and culture change stories. I introduced a couple of ideas around the people side of change, including that roller coaster of change and how to go through it a little faster. You heard about several safe and playful ways to experiment with culture. And we're going to run this very last experiment. Alex, are you ready? All right. So every one of you should have a little monster card on your table. Okay. And that monster card is something that you're going to take a few minutes to think about what you heard today in this session. And looking at that card, just think about if you met this fear monster in your workplace. What are some of the ways, some of the experiments that you maybe try to fight that monster? Okay, so take a couple of minutes. I'm going to run to the other room and continue this from the other room, right? Okay. Am I bringing this with me? Okay. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
All right. So as you heard, we're going to give a couple minutes, but yeah, just look at that card. That's, oh, if you don't have a card, we'll make sure to get you a card here. But yeah, just look at that and think, as a consultant, if you were brought in to try to help your team resolve the fear that's written on this card, mine, by the way, says success theater. So what would your response to your team be if you were tasked with trying to resolve this problem? We'll just take a minute and think about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you all should have a card in your hands. And you need to find a partner. So someone who's sitting next to you or close to you. So take your card and find a partner.
And so
Need
maybe
two
another,
people together.
actually thinking about this, you know, maybe in another minute or so, another few seconds or something like that. What you want to do is find a pair, find somebody
everyone
else.
has a partner?
And sort of say, you know, my team's problem is this success.
So I'm going to show you 3
and
questions.
here is how
and
I
you're
would
going to take
suggest, here's what
4
success
minutes
theater means to me
to
and
talk
how
to
I
your
would
partner
recommend my
about
team
this
solves
question.
it, and then share that information with
And the questions are,
the partner that you're talking to and sort of learn what their fear, what their team's fear is and how they would
what is your
resolve it.
name? What is your role?
The translation is the problem in it.
Yes,
Could you say something in the English room?
All right, so I think that slide changed.
今、アレックスの部屋、アレックスさんが向こう側で話してくれているので、
someone
ちょっと今
and
こちらを、
basically just
このサポ
we
ーターを
talk with them about kind of what your fear is, and you know what your name is, what your role is by looking at the.
Alex is in that room. I'm doing it in this room.
Could you say something or translate here?
Yes.
あ
Okay.
とこちらの通訳は私の方にします。
Okay. So we're going to give the instructions again. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you should all have a card with you. And you should have a partner. Yes. With your partner, you're going to take 4 minutes to talk about these 3 questions. What is your name? What is the role that you're currently playing in your organization? And then look at your little monster and think, what can you try if you meet this monster in your workplace? Okay? So 4 minutes. All right. Yes, everyone should see this cute boy. So the question I want you to take away with you when you're going back to your organizations, if you were 10 times more courageous, what experiments would you try in your workplace? Okay. 10 times more courageous than you are today. Because you've been already courageous today. Remember, we tried 3 experiments in this room and in the room, behind me. So you pushed yourself out of comfort zone. I did too. Interpreters did too. Alex and Kawaguchi-san, I appreciate everyone kind of playing alone with this experiment, and take it back. Take the cards, take what you learn, and try something in your org. With that, thank you very much.